A new report from the city's Department of Social Services details the record-breaking progress that the agency has made in connecting New Yorkers to permanent housing. The agency says that today more than 60,000 households use the city's housing voucher program known as City FEPS. The program helps New Yorkers move out of the city's shelters and into affordable housing. The Social Services Agency also says it has connected more than 37,500 New Yorkers in shelter to subsidized housing in a single year. That's the highest number of subsidized placements in more than 2 decades. But of course, it's not all good news. Officials are sounding the alarm about cuts to key federal programs under the Trump administration that will hurt New Yorkers. Joining me now to talk more about all of this is Department of Social Services Commissioner Molly Wasow Park. DSS oversees both the Human Resources Administration and the Department of Homeless Services. Welcome back to the program. Great to see you.
Nice to see you. Thanks so much for having me back.
This is a titanic amount of work. I guess the numbers that stood out to me in your report, 28% increase in the number of placements year over year, taking people out of shelter and into permanent housing. Total of 50,000 shelter residents moved into permanent homes last year. This is in part because you created a whole new agency or sub-agency to try and deal with it, right?
Yep. We brought all of the housing functions that were across the agency and brought them together under one team. We really think that this is going to increase transparency and accountability. Really, before you had housing across the agency accountable to, the only person who was all accountable to me, it was me. And while that matters, I think it matters a lot to have a single line. Landlords, tenants, others can know where to go to if they have a question. But it has really been an all hands on deck effort to move the needle and to continue to raise the number of exits from shelter into permanent housing. Dozens of really technical and very unsexy projects, but that improve the use of technology, streamline documents, lots of training, and it's really paid off. As you mentioned, the 28% increase over last year. Last year was also a record-breaking number. In the 2.5 years that I've been commissioner, we've more than doubled the size of the City FEPS program.
So now you also have a homelessness prevention administration unit.
Yes.
And you're trying to prevent people on the front side. What does that consist of?
So again, sort of bringing together some programs that were scattered across the agency. We have our Right to Counsel program, so those in housing court can have access to an attorney. That was not connected to the programs that help people access emergency rental assistance or get other kinds of counseling to avoid homelessness, to stay in their homes, prevent housing instability. So by bringing that all together and really actually stripping out from that area some things that weren't related to housing supports and housing stability, we're going to allow them to focus. I really think that this is cementing our identity as a housing agency. It's not what most people think of when they think of the Department of Social Services, but we are running one of the largest rental assistance programs in the country.
Well, yeah, in fact, I want to, if you could put up that graphic, folks, I want to take a look at that. City FEPS, you're up to about 96,000 households, making you the one of the largest housing authorities in the nation. So that's the charcoal portion on the extreme right. That shows kind of where we're up to as far as the numbers who are being served by all of this. Yep. You have a lot of other services, but City FEPS is the engine that really drives all of this.
Yep, we've got about 60,000 households on City FEPS, and then another close to 30 or so on other forms of rental assistance through the HIV/AIDS administration, the state's FEPS program, a few other things like that. But City FEPS is where the growth has really come.
Are we indirectly driving up the cost of housing by having the city pay for so many apartments?
So we set our benchmark our rents, the rents that we will pay to the HUD established or federally established fair market rent. And that is by definition the 40th percentile for rents around the city. So this is something that gets reassessed every year. So I'm quite confident that we are benchmarking to moderate rents in the city.
Let's talk about the federal actions that are going to maybe harm the safety net. There are 1.8 million New Yorkers who rely on SNAP benefits. That's for food, and about 500,000 of those are kids. What's likely to happen in the near future?
So HR 1 made a number of very significant changes to the SNAP program. It requires us to implement new work requirements, and we actually got guidance from the USDA late on Friday that those are slated to go into effect very, very quickly. There's going to be a large swath of New Yorkers who are going to need to meet work requirements in order to qualify for food benefits. It reduces benefits that many households are eligible to get. It eliminates SNAP benefits for certain categories of legal immigrants. And then significantly, it shifts a lot of costs from the federal government down to the state and then ultimately to the local level. That might not be felt immediately by the households, but when we talk about city FEPs, that's a very large city tax levy funded discretionary program. If we are now responsible for covering significant costs that should be a federal responsibility, that puts strain on city FEPs as well.
What is the work, when it comes to the work requirements, what does that mean in practical terms? In the old days, when it was first implemented in New York, it meant you had to come in and look through yellow pages and prove to somebody you'd gone on some job calls and things like that.
So for the universe of people who are eligible, which under the new rules is people 18 to 64, so they've raised the age limit quite substantially, who don't have a dependent child under the age of 14. They need to demonstrate 80 hours a month worth of work. And there are some variety of ways that you can do this, but the thing that I keep coming back to is that it's not enough to work to comply with work requirements. You have to be able to document, and those hours have to be consistent. So, for example, I was in Washington, D.C. and at a hearing, and there was a home health aide who was testifying in front of the committee about the impact of SNAP work requirements. She worked multiple jobs, but if one of her clients goes into the hospital for a week, she doesn't have work hours.
She works when the agency calls her.
Right. And so, in a world where a lot of people work in a shift economy, a lot of people work in a gig economy, being able to consistently document that you meet those work requirements is really challenging. I absolutely anticipate that a lot of people are going to lose their SNAP benefits.
Yeah, so your estimate that upwards of 130,000 could be impacted. That's not to say they would all lose their benefits, but they'll have to comply.
There's 130,000 who are in this new definition, broader definition of eligibility, and then another 90 to 100,000 in the original definition of eligibility. So it's a lot of people.
There's a program, Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act. I don't know how you, PROWARA, I guess you would call it.
Yeah, it's a terrible acronym.
Terrible acronym. But it's they're reinterpreting it in a way that is going to remove some critical life-saving benefits, is what your agency is saying.
Yeah, this one's a real challenge. This is the Welfare Reform Act of 1996. So this is something that's been around for a very long time. Shortly after it was originally passed, there was an interpretation that said certain categories of public spending don't count as benefits for which you have to do an immigration check. The Trump administration this summer reinterpreted that and said, essentially anything that the public sector, that's federal government, but also state and local government, is spending money on, you now need to do an immigration check in order to provide that service. There's a stay right now. We're very grateful to Tish James and the other attorneys general who led that. But it could mean, if that stay was lifted, right, that if somebody goes to a food pantry, because we put $70 million a year into food pantries, that they would not be able to access emergency food unless that they can demonstrate that they are a U.S. citizen.
That's got to go to court, because they're clearly dragging you into their immigration, their mass deportation campaign.
It is absolutely targeting immigration, but it's going to hit all kinds of people, because who in that moment of crisis, when you need to go to a food pantry, thinks to take along your birth certificate or your passport?
Right. In our last minute, you've been in social services in the city going back to, what did you say, the Giuliani administration?
I started in government in the Giuliani administration.
Okay, so presumably you'll be around for the next one. What's your advice to the next mayor?
I think it's going to be a really challenging balance to manage the combination of the federal cuts, but then it's also really important to think proactively and to continue to advance an agenda. I'm encouraged that across the board there's all of this conversation about affordability. We know that need is high, and I think continuing to focus on that while managing through the federal challenges is going to be challenging but important.
Okay. Thanks very much. Congratulations on all the work you and your folks are doing.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay.